Black Friday and Cyber Monday are holidays, I think primarily here in the United States, that are really focused on retail sales. It's called Black Friday because many retail businesses run in the red, as in not making a profit yet, and finally turn into the black on this date. There's a lot riding on that and a lot to be predicted in this hockey stick time series. This episode's all about Black Friday. So what better a time for us to reopen our store? That's right, head over to dataskeptic.com and click on store. Get yourself a t-shirt or other piece of apparel. We've got a lot of goodies in there and more stuff coming. Support your favorite data science podcast, dataskeptic.com/store. And while you're browsing there, I've got 4 interviews for you today, starting with my longtime and recently infrequent co-host, Linda. She shares some of her retail experiences. Let's get into it. Linda, welcome back to the show.
Happy Thanksgiving. Oh, wait, no, we're not allowed to say that. I don't know when you're airing. Okay.
No, I said it was secular. I didn't say it couldn't be pro-Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that was yesterday when this will air, or it's tomorrow as we record. For many years now, we've been married. Early on in that process, you often asked me around this time of year, excitedly, what do you want to buy for Black Friday?
Yeah.
So you must have a history with this holiday. What is your story with Black Friday?
I mean, I don't have a history other than my parents, who are always looking for deals, will tell me what they bought. Actually, when I talked on the phone with them yesterday, they told me they bought this like fun electronic for only $30. I don't even know what it was. They were like, Linda, we bought this gadget. It was on sale for Black Friday, $30. They like to brag, like, so for them, it's a really big bragging that they got points because they've saved money. And I'm like, I don't know. The best way to save money is not to spend it, period. But
Sure.
But I mean, they'll just, when I come over, they'll point to a gadget, like a TV, and they'll be like, Linda, only $100.
So they didn't buy a TV for $30. What is this $30 steal they got a hold of?
I don't know. I couldn't hear, and I didn't bother asking. I was like,
All right.
okay, you bought something for $30. That's a gadget.
Well, as long as it was a good deal, I guess that's what counts.
Yeah, it was electronic. I don't know.
What
Sorry.
isn't electronic anymore? No one's selling anything photonic.
Clothes?
Anyway.
Food?
Yeah, fair enough.
Is your question more like, why is Black Friday important to me? Or what's the opportunity on Black Friday?
Yeah, like, I've always felt Black Friday was kind of a scam. Like, I've never seen a deal I really cared about and I stopped paying attention. But you always seem like maybe you'll get something.
Oh, there's tons of deals. When we buy furniture, Kyle, we bought our coffee table for like 50% off.
Really?
We bought a few other things that were like 20% off because during Black Friday, they start discounting things because they want, well, first of all, they have those loss leaders. So, they have a few things that they set on sale. Then that brings them in, and then people buy additional things on top of it, for free shipping.
That's always a scam. Like, I have it on very good authority that in the late 90s, if you went to a particular Best Buy in the suburbs of Chicago and they had like 10 TVs, all 10 of those went to friends of the manager.
I mean, listen, I can't speak to your very narrow experience as one
Sure.
example.
I just mean the whole thing seems rigged.
I mean, it's rigged because you do have to be first come, first serve for much of them. There isn't like a
Right.
random lottery.
Yeah, and they're not enforcing people cutting in line and stuff. It's a mob. It's a fiasco.
Yeah, but my dad, he likes to wake up at 5 a.m. Before COVID, he would wake up at 5 a.m. and then he'll be like, Linda, I couldn't sleep, so I drove to Walmart. Guess what I got at Walmart? He goes, I got this. He got all of these deals. He goes, yeah. He goes, it's great. And I was like, okay, Dad, good for you. And he comes home with these random gadgets that I didn't even know he wanted.
Well, you got your eyes on anything for yourself this year?
I don't know. I actually haven't had a look around. We don't really need any interior design stuff, like furniture. We don't
No,
need.
not
Well,
really.
maybe we need a new ottoman, or we need it reupholstered. The one that
Oh,
we have.
yeah, the ottoman's in bad shape.
That's the only thing where I'm like, oh, maybe we reupholster it or we get a new one, And
Yeah.
so I need to keep my eye out for that. So maybe I'll look for an ottoman. I always like clothes. With these COVID times, I don't really leave the house very often, so I don't really need that many clothes. I just don't leave the house.
Yeah.
I wear the same like 5 outfits over and over again.
All right, so I've talked to you mostly about being a consumer, but you have greater insight than this, do you not?
Yeah. I've also worked in retail and e-commerce.
the main Black Friday industry. So is it
Yeah,
real? Do
so
people actually buy a bunch of stuff, or is it a scam?
for some of my retail companies, they do make, something like 80, a majority of their money, more than 60% comes in during Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. So
60% of what?
of their revenue, and sometimes more. It
Over
depends on
what
the company.
period?
Over the entire year, but more than 60% of their revenue comes from Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's.
So from January to October, you're struggling, you sell 40%, and then you make all this money in the last 2 months. That sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, some retail companies, they really do have that model. So they are gearing up for that all year long.
What does it mean to gear up at that point? That seems like quite a feat.
Well, I mean, I'm not really on that kind of planning side, but let's
Hmm.
say first of all, you would have to think about volume. Let's say you know that from previous years you sell 100,000 units. And so that means you're going to start ordering by the summertime, And you don't want to commit too early and you don't want to commit too late. If you commit too early, you're going to go with trends that maybe aren't sellable or aren't in demand. If you commit too late, it won't be delivered in time for the customer to actually buy, right? So they're ramping up, they're looking at the past season's data, and then they're also looking at the recent market trends and predictions to figure out, okay, if last year 100,000 units were sold, do we project up, project down? Like, what do we think demand's going to be? Because if you sell out, that means they probably could have made more, right?
Hmm.
So they're trying to maximize their profits. So they're gearing up for that and they're planning all of this in advance. Whereas for the rest of the year, let's say if only like 20% of your revenue comes from the rest of the year, that means you're not ordering very big volumes or quantities for the rest of the year. Those are
Hmm.
very low, they're very low risk, as you can imagine. So they're just kind of like, oh, okay, if we have a, and in some ways, I can imagine maybe they could use those as testing grounds for what they sell in November, December. It just depends on the model, right? Like if it's super seasonal and it's very trendy, then maybe you can't reuse it. But maybe it could be if it's a toy company. I mean, I feel like toy companies, they're always testing things, and then things that work, they combine them and make a new thing that's slightly different. So I wouldn't be surprised if, for example, they had like a doll, and then this doll did well, and they're like, okay, we'll do an add on with a doll plus a dog for Christmas. So it's not
Sure.
that risky. They're using like the rest of the year as like a beta test ground, because again, lower risk, lower quantities. So that's how, if I were a retail company that's dealing with physical goods and ordering, how I might use that time.
So you used the word projection a couple of times. Can you elaborate on what you mean? What kind of projection did these companies do?
I mean, I'm going to be honest, a lot
Hmm.
of it's like guesswork. They just look at their historical numbers and they say, okay, this is how much was sold last year. They're like, here's how many customers we have currently. This is our rate of growth, or hopefully it's a rate of growth. And then they make some assumptions about how many people are return visitors. There is really no fortune cookie that's going to project something new about how it's going to sell, and even something old. If you already sold X amount of quantities, doesn't mean someone's going to come back and buy it again. The question is it replenishable? Replenishable things could be like soap, right? You run out of soap and you buy it again. Is there really going to be a big soap surge during November and December? Probably not. If you have
Hmm.
a sale, that'll drive the surge, but it's not necessarily, or maybe there is a little bump. Maybe people want mint scented Christmas for their Christmas guests to use on their hands.
Well, if there are things that are new and novel, and if you're saying there's a virtue in that and people want to have that and bring it to market, that also means that that product has no historical data whatsoever. Can you leverage a data scientist in any way, or is it truly guesswork, like you said?
Well, the companies I've worked with, it's been mostly guesswork. In terms of data science, we have in one of my companies, they employed a team of data scientists, but because there are so varying factors, it was just more they were testing the data sciences, algorithms, and recommendations against the humans. And then slowly, as the algorithm shows statistical significance in terms of performing better, then they would like rely on the data model a little bit more. But I think because at least if it's retail, if it's trendy, you always have to have that human element. You don't want to just be an automaton and every company producing the same thing. So you have to know when to rely on the data and when not to, and kind of just make sure you're keeping an eye on both.
So you hit on one of the classic problems earlier, the inventory problem, that you might need to be ordering things sooner. What is that actually like? Everyone kind of intuitively gets that, right? The products have to get to the store on time in order to be on the shelves, but there's more to it. How far in advance do companies have to really plan Black Friday?
I mean, it depends on your goods. One example at Dollar Shave Club, like if they were going to develop a new shampoo, that would take 1 to 2 years. They could probably do it faster if they were rushing, depending on the product, maybe 8 months if they knew what they were developing. But I would say like 1 year is like the safest timeline. And that means you're like developing the formula, you're designing the bottle, there's regulatory testing. If there's any other health and safety testing required in your country, you need to get those lab tests tested. And for these lab tests, some of them just have a set time. For example, if you're making sunscreen, it has to literally sit in the exact bottle you're going to sell it in for 30 days, 60 days, for a certain amount of time. And then they check your product to make sure it's still stable. So there are just some timelines you can't really shorten. I know the country is feeling this, but with shipping too. Shipping things all the way, many things are still made out of the country. Usually it comes via boat. And a boat is the speed it's going at, and that's how long it gets here. With recent changes and the backed up ports, now it's even taking longer and being more costly to ship things. So, to answer your question, like, let's make up a fake product, the shampoo. Let's say you take like 3 to 4 months to develop the formula, approve it, and you take like maybe 3 to 6 months to test it, do lab testing, make sure it's stable, and do minor tweaks. And then during that time, you're going to go ahead and order the bottle parts, whatever bottle you're going to fill it with. So we call those components. You're going to design the bottle. So that happens in parallel. You're going to make sure the bottles are shipped to whoever is going to create the formulation, and they're responsible for filling each bottle with the formula. And make sure the bottles and the caps, any other requirements, are there ahead of time. In parallel, you're also doing bottle and packaging testing. So that means you're actually testing to make sure they fill the bottle. If they seal it a certain way, they need to make sure the seal is working with your exact formulation. And then they put it in these giant like package testing, and they like fake ship it and like knock it around. Because if you make, let's say, 10,000 units of something and you ship it and they all burst, then you just lost that money. So part of it is a lot of package testing and making sure none of them explode, that they're stable, because they're going to be on a very hot cargo ship for I'm not sure how long, but it definitely takes weeks and could take months depending what happens. And so all of that takes at least a year, although I'm not in that industry, so there's probably certain things you could do in parallel to speed that up. That's for a formulation thing. If you're making a toy that's more stable, maybe there's less testing there. I don't know. Maybe do they do lead testing or arsenic testing on toys? Probably not. They probably just hold themselves to that standard. So there's probably less timeline involved for something like that.
So that's fascinating to me. That means, or at least from the sound of it, that manufacturing is really focused on supply chain. And the idea that you could predict Black Friday might not even be that useful because you have to just have your inventory decisions made months in advance. Would you agree with that? Is there any reason to try and study, how big of a spike it's going to be this year?
I don't know. It's so hard to say. Some of the spikes, they're related to how much inventory people have too, right? But I mean, I guess if let's say you have a toy and you're like, I was going to spend $100 on the toy and the toy's sold out. Most people, I guess, might go spend that $100 elsewhere. Or do they? If they really wanted there's intention buying, and then there's more like, oh, I just saw an opportunity. So I'm just curious about that too. If the supply chain problems impact the amount of spend people will spend. I don't know.
Yeah, I think as far as predictions, this year might be a crapshoot, even more than last year. That I don't recall so many supply chain disruptions last year. It really sounds like Christmas might be canceled. Who knows?
Well, it started last year, but it's gotten progressively worse over the last year.
Yeah, which we have visually confirmed. We saw the ships backed up when we took that little boat trip, and the port has a long line of boats just waiting to come in here in the port
In the
of
port
Long
of
Beach.
LA,
Yeah.
it is backed up.
Well, this has been good. Any closing thoughts you have, Linda?
Well, I don't understand. So, when you're talking about data science helping predict models, what were you thinking?
The intention of the episode is really to explore what is Black Friday, what does it look like numerically in the time series data, and is there anything useful a data scientist can actually do to help a company that has a Black Friday trend? Like here at Data Skeptic, I don't know that we have a Black Friday annual kind of thing, but like a retail company certainly does. There are lots of data scientists working for retail companies. Is it useful for them to try and predict how big the spike will be or what Cyber Monday will look like? I mean, that's an interesting project, but it has to inform a business decision. And if those decisions were made last March, there isn't much to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a data scientist and you want to give insights about to inform the quantity of how much to order, then those conversations are definitely happening by the summertime or March, depending on your supply chain lead up time. Um, but like, let's say they are making the decisions now. What would you ask them, or what would you know, or what would you want to advise on?
Oh, well, I mean, for me, data science is always about understanding what decision the company needs to make and informing that decision. So if everything's about supply chain, then I just want to look at that data. If it's, there really is a marketing focus about something with social media kind of things, then we can look at that data. The numbers tell the story, but you have to have the right numbers.
Makes sense. Well, I think that there's probably room for data scientists embedded within a company to try to advise. But I also wonder like how fast the data could come around. Because oftentimes what I find is data scientists will be like, "Oh, that's a great question. We're not there yet. We don't have this set up. We're missing XYZ." So it's like, okay, they're like, maybe in a year, once we do XYZ, then we could be more helpful on this question. And we're like, okay, that's what I often find.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to the specifics, but I do relate to that and understand why that would be the case. If you need to make these real-time decisions, is this a nightly batch process or is it truly real-time? And is it eventually consistent or is the data good right off the bat? There are a lot of just infrastructure challenges that someone who knows the modeling doesn't always know the engineering.
Yeah. Yep. Makes sense.
Well, this has
So
been
maybe
good.
sometimes you help, sometimes you can't.
True. Well, let's wind up. I kind of already asked you this, but you're not in the market for anything? Is there anything you're hot about thinking you're going to buy? What might arrive at the house here?
Well, I already bought some cell phone accessories, given that I bought a new cell phone recently. So that's top of mind. I got some Bluetooth headphones I'm going to buy, but those aren't on sale because I always buy the cheapest ones.
Why do you buy the cheapest Bluetooth? Bluetooth is notoriously unreliable. You want to buy an expensive
Actually,
one.
I didn't even buy a Bluetooth headphone. I bought ones that end with the USB-C, so I could at
Yeah,
least use a
that's.
cable on the phone.
Oh, they took
I
out the headphone
refuse.
jack?
Yeah, there's no headphone jack, but there is a
Oh,
USB-C. So I'm gonna try these headphones that instead of a adapter, because my adapter went funny. So I was like, I'm just gonna get the headphones where it's actually USB-C at the end, and hopefully they'll last longer.
doubt it.
I don't know why, but the USB-C headphones, my past ones, like the adapter got messed up, and then it stopped working.
They need to stop messing around with stuff and just let us have the normal headphone jack that works correctly. We don't want all this fancy nonsense that doesn't work.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That
what am I looking for? I'm looking for cell phone accessories.
uh-huh.
Like I said, if there's a perfect ottoman that fits our living room situation,
True.
maybe that. Um, I could buy more expensive skates, but I think since there is a roller skating shortage, I don't think any will be on sale.
There's a roller skating shortage. How do you know this?
because during COVID, everyone went out and bought roller skates. So it then spiked the price of roller
What
skates.
about the secondary market?
You mean like used?
Yeah.
People sell their used roller skates for very expensive and very close to new price. I'm like, I'm just gonna buy it new based on their prices.
You think we could be speculators in this market?
Oh, I don't want to become one. No,
All right.
not for me. No, thank you.
All right. Well, yeah, I don't think I'm going to buy anything. I would love to have a new trumpet, but I don't really deserve it.
Well, okay. Although I wouldn't be surprised if I come home and hear you playing the trumpet.
But not a new one.
We'll see. You play it in the garage, so I would never know.
True. Well, anyway, thanks for coming on, Linda. It's always good to catch up on the show, and I really appreciate your insights about Black Friday here.
Okay. Well, happy Thanksgiving, love.
Indeed, happy Thanksgiving to one and to all,
All
and to
right.
all the
Bye.
good comatose nap.
Yes.
The following message comes from Dataiku, the platform for everyday AI. Let's face it, the potential for positive change with AI is huge. But seeing that value is hard. AI-driven growth is about organizational transformation, not just technology, and today's businesses struggle with the complexities of bringing AI innovation to fruition. That is where Dataiku comes in, infusing a culture of working with data and AI every day and at every level of the company. Whether solving for the mundane, like automating forecasting, or what is the optimal number of widgets to buy, or understanding moonshots that push the limits of today's technology to grow your organization and innovate. That's everyday AI. Join more than 45,000 people worldwide across banking, insurance, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, retail, and more who are driving results with Dataiku. Visit dataiku.com to learn more. That's dataiku.com. Next up, we've got Sean Law. Sean is a future guest of Data Skeptic. You'll have to tune in a few weeks to hear more details about matrix profiles. But here's the high and low of it. First concept is time series chains. These are little subsequences that are in order, and maybe there are multiple subsequences in a time series you want to compare. The matrix profiling techniques he worked on in the Stumpy library help you do that. And while we were discussing it, I was intrigued to find out that there's a Google Trends dataset related to the retail store Kohl's. Sean helps provide some insights from that data about how Black Friday affects that retailer.
So in one of the original research papers, there's a topic called time series chains. And really what this means is that if you take your time series and you compute the matrix profiles, the question that you can ask is, for a subsequence, where's that nearest neighbor located? And so if it happens to be located in the future, then for that subsequence, where's that next nearest neighbor located? And so you can kind of have this chaining effect where you keep moving forward across time. Once you compute these time series chains, the example that they used was looking at the Kohl's retail store. So how many people were performing a Google search for the word Kohl's? And they actually showed that there's some not only seasonality across time, presumably if you have a growing business, but they also noticed that when you compute the matrix profile, it identifies global minima near the end of the year. And so the first minima, there's two of them. The first one happens on Thanksgiving, and then there's a second minima that happens in around Christmas time period. But what they then notice is that thanks to these time series chains, that year over year over year, that first hump increases and overtakes the second hump. And the reason being is that in around, I guess, 2007 or so, there was the creation, I guess, or reimagination of this day called Cyber Monday, right, where people are increasing their Google searches. And so leveraging matrix profiles, you're able to see this. But as proposed in the paper itself, they were even suggesting that because you've identified these patterns over time, you might then be able to take this information and think about potentially forecasting what next year's search query amount will be.
My name is Mitchell Reynolds. I'm the Senior Manager of Data Science at an e-commerce company. And in my spare time, I've been working and hacking away at a AI artist project where I'm trying to generate art with various types of GANs. There's an artist slash machine learning engineer that I follow. His first name is Leo, and he has just created this whole system to use GANs to generate artwork and move between different types of artists and styles. And that got me inspired, and he shared his high level architecture. And when I looked at that, I was like, I think I can make that and make something similar and just kind of play around with GANs, which I hadn't experimented with before, and also make something hopefully new. I've been a little bit in the arts space, and so just getting started on that. I have a bunch of the GPUs, so that's what I do in my spare time.
So from your point of view inside an e-commerce company, is Black Friday something that is worth spending resources trying to forecast?
Oh, definitely. It is a very important day for e-commerce companies. And for the company I'm in right now, it is a very large fraction of our sales for the month of November. So definitely important to get it right. And there's a lot of moving parts that have it where you spike sales by about 5x on a given day. And a lot has to happen for that to go smoothly and so that the customer experience isn't noticed on the other end.
Scaling up to make the customer experience go smoothly can stress a business in many ways. Most listeners know how cloud computing can help the technology scale up. Are there other aspects of the business that might need to scale as well?
Yeah, given that we're an e-commerce company, there's physical products, so you learn a lot about how your digital data will ultimately impact the world of atoms. And so we have to be able to move that product, staff it, send it across the United States. And so last year we did multiple things to make that go as smooth as possible, given how the world was in 2020. And with COVID and social distancing measures, and also with the rise in e-commerce. There was a lot more people buying online, and overall our sales were much higher and took up a large portion of the business, much higher than before. We were around 70% of the total sales. Even though we are in the consumer packaged goods industry, historically sales were in the retail, in stores that you physically buy something. But last year, most of our sales were from e-commerce, and Black Friday in particular was a day that we wanted to get right, and then also Cyber Monday as well.
How do you compute your forecasts?
Before we were using a weekly level forecast, and that was done rather in old systems that I inherited, and I quickly moved that into a model. It did take some time, but I heavily used the Facebook Profit time series modeling package, and it's wonderful. It does a lot of cool stuff under the hood. Some of it that I don't fully understand, but I know that it has a Markov chain Monte Carlo simulations underneath or distributions that it's creating, and then is forecasting future sales. And that was necessary because we needed to have daily level volumes. And so this model normally operates very well, following closely the trend of what we sell on a day-to-day basis. And so that was used really at the start of COVID. We needed that daily level volume because our warehouses needed to be able to staff accordingly. And so we have this baseline model that also factors in these huge spikes in demand, which are usually caused by emails. So when an email goes out, the average volume will be maybe like 2x on that particular day. Whereas on a slower day, it might be a little bit less than X, assuming that X is the average. And so kind of like a zigzag, you can kind of think of it bouncing around quite a bit. But the Facebook profit model that I built was the baseline. And then we moved a bunch of things around where we, for example, part of our business is based on subscription. And so people subscribe to our product and get it every month, every 2 weeks, so on. And so we moved all those people that would normally have their subscription around Black Friday and Cyber Monday. We just emailed them in advance saying, with shipping delays and also labor, we just communicated clear with the customer, we're going to move your order forward so that you get it like a full week and a half earlier. So then that would also decrease the demand for warehouses and on the subsequent supply chain network so that it was a little bit easier to handle. And so that was removed, which was a first time event. So I had to factor that into, now we're a bit more in kind of estimating and a little bit of manual forecasting because I wasn't exactly clear on how I could forecast a bunch of one-time events that happened and needed to layer all these pieces in. So first one was moving subscription orders. The second one, as I mentioned earlier, was spreading out the Black Friday sale across the week. Third one was understanding overall just how e-commerce, given that it was much higher than previous years, how much that would potentially have this multiplicative effect on sales, which it did. And so overall, the forecast very much fell in line with what actually happened, which I was very nervous about, and was able to pass on the forecast to our operations team, who back in, I think, like September, needed to know how much product it was. And so I had that overall amount communicated. And then the second part was communicating with our facilities that fulfill the packages and also ship it across the United States. And so having kind of two forecasts for two different business units made the whole Black Friday and Cyber Monday whole weekend much smoother, or I guess now week, because it expanded much longer than just a weekend.
Are you forecasting at the high level, or do you have to go down to the granularity of the SKU?
That one I do both. There's a daily level aggregated sum of all the units, so that's for the staffing. And then there's a separate model that's only needed for the weekly basis, so it's a different process to get that one, and that's for the per SKU. And we have about 80 products. And so that one, you kind of break down the problem into two parts. You have your baseline sales, which are in essence the organic website traffic. And the biggest part is really the subscribers that subscribe to each one of those products. And then the part that's a little tricky is getting the incremental demand, which is often driven by promotions and marketing events. And so when we send out an email that has a particular product, that's going to spike sales for that week. And so when you're looking back at past data and trying to estimate the baseline, that's often the hardest part, because getting those marketing events and pulling those out can be a little tricky, given that we run so many promotions. And so pulling those out to get to a true baseline is, I would say, probably 80% of the work. And then you kind of do the other part where you know where the promotions happened, so you can just help that inform your future incremental forecast.
Well, we know intuitively that there should be some sort of annual pattern, maybe something more, like how the first few days could be leading indicators. Does the model pick up on any of these lagged or autocorrelated things?
Yeah, I did add in a few seasonality components into the model. Also added in holidays as well, which I think is built in so that the model could pick up on that. So that kind of picks up on these overtime features. The smaller pieces that were a little bit harder, and it seems that the model picked it up, but I didn't directly put it in, but we usually send 2 emails for a promotion. And so on the first day, sales are much stronger than on the 5th day when we send the last chance email. And so when I look at the model and look at the data, it does seem, just from looking at it, which again, like I haven't gone too deep into the actual variables, and just more of looking at the error, the train test and dev set. And so when I look at the data, I do see that there's this bigger spike on day 1 of the promotion versus day 5. So it seems to pick up a little bit of that lag with emails. But yeah, there's a whole bunch to, I think, explore. Luckily, I think has done well enough that I haven't needed to explore a better approach.
I'm Jeff Wheelwright, tech journalist and host of the ARM Viewpoints podcast. Along with ARM, the company whose technology sparked the mobile revolution, we're bringing you the latest from the heart of the tech world. I've had fascinating conversations with industry experts about topics ranging from AI and data security to the promise of 5G and the future of healthcare, and we're just getting started. Join us as we explore the evolving world of computing. Download and subscribe to ARM Viewpoints at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Are there any other novel days besides Black Friday that you need to worry about or forecast?
Current company I'm in is a health-focused brand, and so at the start of the year, there's a lot of marketing events that happen for the health and trying to get people, to start the year off right. And, there's stuff like, quote, new year, new you. We try to stay away from that. I don't know if it's trademarked, but it's kind of easy copy. So we don't actually add it into our marketing, or at least not anymore. I think they did years ago, but we try to be a little bit more creative. And that's one part of the business cycle that is very important for us to start the year off right. So Q1, there's my manager who's been in the industry for a very long time and is a very, very smart guy, all the time says, how Q1 goes, the rest of the year goes. And so getting Q1 off right is a lot of preparation, and a lot of it actually comes in Q3 and Q4 of the prior year. And so what we're doing right now is testing out a couple different marketing channels to understand where can we see the biggest lift. And having the testing budget now is very important, because oftentimes you might test 3 or 4 different channels, but only, 2 work really well and 1 doesn't work at all, and maybe 3 is like decent results. And so having that mix ready at the start of the year is crucial.
So those channels that Mitchell is mentioning, those are your marketing channels. Could be TV, radio, if anyone's still on that. Google ads, mobile ads, social media, Twitter ads, Facebook ads. With so many options, it can be a challenge that many data scientists have to work on to figure out where is the optimal spend. Broadly speaking, this is called marketing mix modeling, or MMM. Last but not least, I speak with Mujtaba Anwar. We get into a curious challenge he had to deal with around Black Friday for a company that had a marketing mix modeling effort going. One of their channels was a social influencer, and there were some concerns about, did that traffic they sent there and the discount attached to it, could that be cannibalizing revenue they would have gotten anyway through their normal channels? It's almost impossible to answer without some sort of counterfactual, so we get into the mathematical approaches that can be taken to try and get some good answer to this problem. So I see you have this conundrum that you don't have a counterfactual. You know the world in which you spent budget on that channel. You don't have a historical data set where you didn't spend the money. So there's like a choice that has to be made. Either you need to turn them off and do a real world experiment, or you need to somehow come up with fictitious data of what it would have been. How did you guys approach it?
Having looked at a lot of the methods available for marketing mix modeling and in supervised learning, we were not really convinced about their effectiveness and efficacy in addressing our research question. So instead, what we agreed on and what the business stakeholders pushed off was to essentially switch off the social influencer channel altogether during Black Friday, because the underlying premise is that, well, the social influencer channel brings in the discounter, and Black Friday is a discounter event anyway. So if the discounter is going to come to the website, they don't have to go to the social influencer, so we will be able to capture them. So essentially, we did switch off the social influencer channel altogether. So we agreed that the way to measure the efficacy of the social influencer channel would be by answering the question, what would have the sales been had we not switched off this social media channel? So that was our research question. Now, I'll tell you the technique we actually did use. So essentially what we used was a synthetic control test. In a synthetic control test, we are trying to create a synthetic time series by assigning a mix of weights to similar events. These similar events are control variables or explanatory variables. And the synthetic time series is the same as your outcome variable of interest prior to treatment, which is in our case, sales prior to Black Friday. Once the outcome variable is treated, which means, the treatment in our case is switching off the influencer channel during Black Friday with this major policy change, we can then calculate the difference in values of the synthetic time series versus the treated time series to see what changes had occurred. And that kind of tells us what was the impact. Here the art and science lies in coming up with weights that are assigned to control variables that are an accurate representation of the treated time series. There is a risk of confusing correlation with causation here, especially because some of the variables that we have from the past could have like a random correlation that has nothing to do with causation. Hence, we had subject matter experts, sense checking these chosen variables and weights. There's also some art in scaling the data and the variables. Absolute numbers can be misleading as the baseline sales grow over time, while events such as Black Friday have more to do with incrementality and spikes to the upside as opposed to the baseline. Long story short, we used a ridge regression to determine these weights, since it penalizes for the overweight variables, which could particularly happen in you're changing the marketing mix quite often, which we were kind of reallocating budgets to the more profitable channels. So the ridge regression helps reduce this bias. We also used weights from a Markov chain Monte Carlo model in parallel to have an alternative Bayesian approach for estimation, as we found that the Markov chain Monte Carlo method is particularly useful and responsive to chasing outliers and pricing in their impacts. The exploratory variables we used included events from the past, data until the pre-intervention period that induced a spike similar in magnitude to Black Friday in percentage terms, while having similar discounts on offer and a full-on marketing mix including the discounted influencers channel. Using these variables as the quote-unquote donor pool, we trained a synthetic time series of sales data that resembled extremely closely to the brand that we were selling. And then we observed how the synthetic time series behaved versus the actually treated one. I must say that the feature engineering process was not as straightforward. The art and science, as I say, lies in the feature engineering here, how we scale the data. And we did do a few transformations, at times calculating the magnitude of the spike relative to the running average sales in order to properly price in the momentum, because we really want to create a very good synthetic time series and create a good lookalike dataset to Black Friday. So in summary, during the post-intervention period, the weights from the Markov chain captured more of the nonlinearity, and it did prove to us that almost 1/3 of the audience reached through the influencers discounter channel was a unique audience, while the other 2/3 was not. Here I must say that we did not price in the propensity of a potential user to visit a brand's website during Black Friday. Because on a normal day, most people would probably not visit a brand's website and would probably just check their Instagram or whichever social media channel they're on and follow their social influencer 3 or 4 times a day, check their stories. So during the Black Friday, their propensity to go on a brand's website really shoots up. Now, we did not take this test as the ultimate conclusion. We did, however, take it as a baseline and did some subsequent tests and found useful insights. There was cannibalization, but also the channel was super useful to reach unique audiences, especially when we are dealing with considered purchases.
That's an interesting insight. It kind of summarizes elegantly that there's, 1/3 were new and 2/3 were not. Is that correct?
Yes, during Black Friday. And as I said, we didn't price in the propensity of a person to visit the website during Black Friday, which does go up, which could mean that, there is another 15 to 20% upside to the influencer's channel. And, perhaps it's not 1/3, it's half, up to half of the customers that are unique that the social media channel brings in. And that's why we did subsequent tests during periods outside of Black Friday to confirm this hypothesis, and it was confirmed.
Interesting. Makes sense. Well, I'm curious. I mean, you've kind of done the job of a data scientist then. You had the question and you brought the answer and the steps along the way of how you got to it. And maybe that's where the role of a data scientist ends. But I'm curious how then the business digests this. Is there an action you take or a next step that comes from learning this?
Yes, so, once we have the insight, the next step for the business is to make it actionable. And particularly in this marketing mix modeling case, or particularly in social sciences, change is, I would say, often gradual. So we gradually did reallocate spends. We did a lot more A/B tests. We also looked deeper into who actually were these audiences were that were being brought in by these social media channels. But yeah, making it actionable was a process that lasted a few months, especially in social sciences, I would say.
So there's maybe a challenge around convincing someone. I mean, it's an elegant statistic you've come up with, but Black Friday is also this rare event. And even, you've had some historicals, but it's a finite set of years that it goes back. Or we could argue even that those dynamics change. How do you grow or help people gain a confidence that they can trust the results?
Yeah, that's interesting. So one of the weaknesses of a data science model on its own, like synthetic control method, is that there is no validation of it. Now, of course, through validation comes the confidence that you're talking about. We did other tests and subsequent studies. One of the ways was to pick other events from the past and then test the synthetic control on them and see and validate, what the synthetic control was suggesting to us. And we used these events, the same events that we had used in this model, and just switched them around. So we kind of took some of the explanatory variables, like one by one, put them as the outcome of interest, and put our outcome of interest pre-treatment period back into the explanatory variable and see how it moves the other way and how things moved in reality. So, I mean, that's one of the ways. But I think there is, particularly in marketing mix modeling, there comes an element of holistic insight that turns then into analytical judgment. I will not tell you that you can just simply look at one test or one number and make decisions. You really have to, oftentimes, more often than not, feed one model into another, and that goes on, and then one model into another. And then that's how you juggle a bigger picture, and then you would use the results from it. In our particular case, with these Black Friday results, we did switch around the media spends. And now, of course, for those who do understand performance marketing and digital marketing, to be more specific, so what we did was we set out one standard deviation above our current spend, and then we raised the spend, and then we used a hill function to kind of find the saturation point. Because as easy as it sounds to raise spend, what we wouldn't want is an altered cost of customer acquisition, and we wouldn't want to be spending beyond the saturation points. Because we set out one standard deviation, we raised the spends, fed lookalikes, and scaled the campaigns, and kept an eye on the saturation points. So it's an ongoing process, but we did use the insight and act on it.
Well, very cool. So question answered and insight leveraged. Is this the end of the story, or is it an ongoing project that you continue to do research on?
Yes, I do continue to do research on marketing mix modeling and even multi-touch attribution, which the marketing mix modeling is increasing in value, I would say, as more and more challenges are brewing with privacy of data and cookies, and with the newer iOS, the targeting, and having a strategic insight with MMM models is going to stay in fashion for a long time, I would say, and I continue the research on it.
Well, as of this time here at Data Skeptic HQ, our marketing mix modeling is simple. You, the podcast listeners, are the only people I've yet directed to go to dataskeptic.com and click on Store. I've been wearing exclusively Data Skeptic apparel for over a week now. You can do the same. If I were still living in Chicago, I would definitely want one of our beanies. As it stands, I think the Turing Machine design t-shirt's my favorite, but our photo is garbage. I gotta get that updated. Go see if there's something you like at dataskeptic.com in our store. Alright everybody, go buy some things, hopefully nothing too frivolous. Don't overextend yourself, and we'll see you next time.